Hello, everyone. This is Tim Harris with the Harris Real Estate University, and this is, of course, the Harris Real Estate University Superstar Interview. Now, what is the Harris Real Estate University Superstar Interview? Quite simply, it's Harris Real Estate University's way of giving back to the real estate community, and that's not just to Harris Real Estate University students, but it's really to any agent who's interested in learning about what's happening now and, frankly, what's going to be relevant going forward in the real estate industry. And so there's been a lot of chatter of late, I've noticed, in the real estate markets about short sales. Obviously, when we started training agents to do short sales back, it's almost been 10 years now. We are the only ones in the nation that we're doing it, and now it seems like there's so many different people that are, in the short sale training space that, frankly, it's caused a lot of confusion amongst the agents out there. Well, there is an attorney, and he's today's expert, Mr. Lee Dreisen, and he is going to be talking a lot about different aspects of, frankly, how agents and brokers get themselves into trouble with short sales, some things that he sees happening. He's just as efficient. In many ways, I think he's probably more efficient than most agents out there because he is seeing the short sale from all different aspects. You got to think of it from an agent's perspective. What do we deal with? We deal with the banks. We deal with the negotiators. We sometimes have to deal with homeowners insurance. We have to deal with, all those different things. We have to, dealing with the homeowners associations. Well, what Lee's seeing is he's seeing things from different perspectives, all the perspectives that we see, but he's also seeing some interesting potential legal issues that have crept into the short sale process that agents and brokers, frankly, are not paying attention to. And it's, caused me enough duress that I decided to feature Lee as this week's superstar. So, Lee, welcome to the call.
Thanks, Tim.
So, Lee, right out of the gates, because I know this is going to go to a national audience, and I suspect that this is going to be an interview that a lot of people are going to want to send around to their fellow agents and brokers just because we're going to be covering a lot of ground, a lot of important things. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do so?
Best way to get a hold of us is call us directly, and they can reach us at area code 702-798-4955.
And so Lee is an attorney here in our hometown of Las Vegas, and actually the way I connected with Lee is because Lee has been going to different brokers' offices, and he's been sort of, rattling some cages, letting agents and brokers know about some of the potential mistakes that they're making. And one of the things that I got an email, just to kind of give you guys the whole backstory. I got an email from probably 3 or 4 of our Harris Real Estate University students in Vegas saying, Tim, you've got to talk to this guy. He's been saying a lot of the same things you guys have been saying for years. And, as a result of some of the things that Lee's been educating the Las Vegas area brokers on, they're completely changing their process and they're completely changing the way they approach short sales. So, Lee, I'm just going to jump right into it. Should agents be calling themselves experts when they're doing short sales?
Well, that's one of my pet peeves, and I just want to preface it so that the students understand that I think you hit the nail on the head. That my perspective is that we handle a lot of short sale negotiations directly as a law firm, but my primary responsibilities and my background is that I am a litigator and have represented agents and brokers at all different levels, whether it's before the real estate division or in the district court, have been retained by most of the largest airs and emissions carriers in the country here in the state of Nevada, and we started seeing this issue pop up. And so the particular question that you're asking is really where I'm wearing my hat, saying, if I am defending a real estate agent who is holding themselves out as holding themselves out as an expert, do I have some concerns about that? And the answer is absolutely. Because first and foremost, you're creating a perception to the client that you have a certain level of training and experience that, quite frankly, you may not have. For example, some of the expert designations is somebody who's taking a 2 or 3 hour video course online and paying a fee, and now they get the certificate of completion and the expert designation. And so I think that it can be extremely misleading by using those kinds of designations.
Well, let me throw something just to reinforce that. It's frustrating for some of our students who, and I know a lot of them work with you, you've got an excellent reputation in the community, and just all over the country, we have agents that are saying, Tim, I'm on this listing presentation, I'm talking to this person who's, also the seller who's also talking with these other people who call themselves experts, and they were telling the seller all kinds of bad information, misinformation. And then I went to the MLS and I found out that this person had closed one short sale or no short sales. And these are agents, Lee, that I know you're dealing with a lot of them in the Valley, as far as people that are actually helping the community who are actually out there closing short sales versus people that are just marketing themselves as experts. It's creating unbelievable potential problems legally going forward, isn't it?
I think it is. And one of the best piece of advice that I give my prospective clients is a couple things, that the real estate industry has changed so dramatically. Every once in a while when I am at a presentation, I'll hear an agent who will say, Lee, I've been doing this for 25 years and I've never been sued and you're a nice guy, but I don't really think we'll need your services. Well, that model has changed dramatically. And unfortunately, it is generally not a question of if, it's a question of when you can get pulled into litigation. And a lot of times, an agent can do everything right in the transaction, but somebody else screws up something, somebody else makes a mistake, and you now find yourself pulled into the litigation. And so the best advice that I have for my prospective clients is you've got to be proactive in your defense. And what that means is that you are constantly preparing yourself to, one, try and avoid litigation, but two, if you do get pulled into the litigation, how can you effectively assist me as your attorney? And so one of the things that concerns me is this misrepresentation to the client, because I assure you that when the client is on the stand and they're talking to the jury about this horrific situation that they find themselves in, we're talking,
Lee, just for the sake of basically setting the table here, we're talking about essentially if there's going to be litigation over short sales, for gosh sakes. There's so many parties involved. And Lee is right now describing kind of the scenario that's the worst case scenario for any agent out there who's calling themselves an expert. You're called into litigation, or Lee even, maybe they're even basically having to give sworn testimony, and the question comes up, are you an expert? Yeah.
And it comes up in the context of this, Tim. They're going to ask the they're going to ask the seller, in the case of the short sale, what their experience is. And they're going to obviously indicate, I have very little experience. I was relying completely upon my agent. Well, what made you select this agent as opposed to anybody else that you may have interviewed? Well, he held that he was an expert. He told me he was certified. I relied upon him, thought he knew more than anybody else out there. It's setting the table for the plaintiff's attorneys to essentially get juries angry about the conduct of the agent. And I think it's really important. At times when I go out and I speak to agents about these kinds of litigation issues, sometimes I've heard from agents, Dryden's an attorney and it was an enjoyable presentation, but quite frankly, he's just trying to scare us to try and get business. But the reality is, it's easy for me to diffuse that, because one of the things that I share with all agents on a national level is the fact that don't take my word for it. Don't take Tim's word for it. You all should look to the National Association of Realtors. Every 2 years they come out with a document called a legal scan. And it's a fascinating document because what it is a survey of top brokers across the country about the kinds of problems that they've been encountering, but also about what they see as being the areas of concern in the future. And what was interesting is toward the end of 2011, we got the most recent legal scan, and the NAR conducted this survey, and they came out, and almost 55% of the survey respondents indicated that short sales were going to be the basis of a significant number of disputes going on right now or in the immediate future, and 74% of the respondents who ranked the issue put it in the top 3 of the future issues. So don't necessarily take my word for it that this is something that you're going to see on the horizon. The most successful brokers across the country are clearly saying, you know what, short sale litigation is going to be becoming a major problem. And I will tell you that we have seen that. We have recently, within the last 6 months, received an assignment from one of the insurance carriers that we do work for of our first short sale litigation case.
Insurance carriers, Lee, being Arizona Emissions Insurance Carrier, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So again, Lee, you and I talked about this prior to our call, but I'm really hoping that, you know, I know everything you've said so far. I've talked with other attorneys about it. I know that it's true, but I think it's really important for the people out there that maybe aren't dialed in as we are, for folks to realize. I mean, you literally were going to brokers' offices, and you still are every day, and you're telling them or suggesting to them that if the agents are calling themselves experts at really anything, you're actually telling them to remove that from their business cards, drop that from their websites. I mean, this is what I was told, correct?
I am very uncomfortable telling people to hold that designation if the experience doesn't fit. If the training doesn't fit to call yourself an expert, be very careful. And I do tell them, consider dropping that. I'm okay having an agent express to a client that here's my areas of experience. Here's my special training. But I'd be very careful about holding out the expert designation. And what was really scary is the flip side is that not only do I go out and talk to agents, but I'm also asked to address brokers groups. And I recently was at an association meeting where we had about 40 brokers, and we talked about how do brokers find themselves in trouble in the short sale area. And obviously, Nevada, like all states, very, very similar, that the responsibility is the liability imposed upon brokers deals with supervision. And supervision includes having a set of standards and policies and procedures regarding short sales. And I will tell you that out of a group of 40, I probably only had about 10 to 15 brokers who could confirm that they even had a written set of policies and procedures, and none of them had reviewed them with counsel.
Exactly. So, I mean, we touched on the Arizona Emissions Insurance. We touched on, and what Lee, I have read and I've talked with different people. I've talked with brokers across the country, and I think you just touched on it. You were dealing directly with an Arizona Emissions Insurance company, basically, that was questioning whether or not they were going to cover, and if I'm speaking out of turn here, just correct me, but they were questioning whether they're going to cover the broker because of the specific agent's actions calling themselves an expert. Am I speaking out of turn here? Because that's the type. Yeah, go ahead.
A little bit, because in the one case that we've recently obtained, the broker hasn't, the carrier hasn't raised that issue. But I will tell you, I have that concern, and here's the reason why. We experienced in our state, probably around 2003, we saw a flood of mold litigation, pardon the pun. And virtually at that time, every Arizona emissions carrier was appointing us to represent and defend the agents where the issues related to undisclosed water damage and mold contamination. And as those cases grew and the exposure on them was enormous, I will tell you that the reaction to the insurance industry was very prompt. And that is that here we are 8-9 years later, and there is not a single insurance policy that I am aware of that provides coverage to the agents for mold damages. And I am really concerned that we're going to see that same trend happen with regards to short sales. For example, in some states, the agents are permitted to engage in short sale negotiations and charge an additional fee, outside, in addition to, not outside of, but in addition to the real estate commission, as long as it's all fully disclosed. Other states say, no, that is not the case. It's part of what you do as a real estate agent. The problem is that the agents can easily cross the line and are no longer performing as a real estate agent, but now they're giving legal advice. And that's where I think you're going to run into these coverage issues. and that you're going to see modifications in these insurance policies that they're going to have a basis to start denying the claims.
Yeah, I mean, that's simply put, right? I mean, so here it is. And Lee, let's change topics because this is obviously getting a little bit scary for a lot of people. Brokers, agents, everyone else listening, you have been warned. I mean, I don't know what else to say more than that. It's not enough coming from me. Now I'm bringing one of the nation's best attorneys that's frankly become a real expert, at least locally, and he's going nationally with being seen as an expert on this topic. Brokers, I don't care where you are in the country, connect with Lee. Learn about what you should be doing to protect yourself. You have been warned. So there it is. So Lee, let's change to another question. I mean, unless there's anything else you want to say about this.
No, I mean, I think that, the intention isn't to scare the heck out of agents and brokers. But I think if we raise the level of awareness, we get agents and brokers to question what they're doing before they go out and do it, quite frankly, Tim, that's how you be proactive in your defense. Because more often than not, I rarely find agents that go out and intentionally try and mislead people or do something inappropriate. And I think it speaks very highly of the profession. But what I do find is that people aren't listening to that common sense, that little red light that's flashing before their eyes and saying, you know what, maybe I should slow down a little bit and think about how I'm holding myself out or the representations that I'm making. And if we raise that level of awareness, you know what, we've done a great job.
So, I mean, what you're saying, you're having the exact same experiences that Julie and I are having when we're doing, speaking. We're speaking to a couple hundred agents recently, and this topic comes up. It always comes up, about should I be calling myself an expert and yada yada. So there was somebody in the front row, like I can even remember exactly what she looked like, and she was digging in her heels. I have this designation. I went to this day and a half's worth of training or whatever it was, watched a bunch of videos, and I'm an expert. And there were people in the audience that I knew for a fact, Lee, that were closing 50, 100, 150 short sales a year. So, this gal who just got this, and they, by the way, the agents that were doing that kind of volume, they don't call themselves experts, right? Because they've kind of thought through this. They've talked to people like you. They know that, they're trying to prepare themselves. So in any event, I asked this gal, I didn't want to embarrass her, but at the same time, maybe she needed to be embarrassed. I just asked her straight up, how many short sales have you closed? None. I said, so you can feel comfortable going to a seller, telling him you're an expert when you've never actually done the process. I mean, does this even make sense? And, she was angry at the time, but afterwards, an hour later after we were done, she came and thanked me and said she thinks, she got it. So, I mean, you're saying the same thing, basically.
That you were fortunate that agent recognized it, because I had a very similar instance where an agent approached me recently and was telling me about his expertise and telling me about an issue that came up, and I said, yeah, but the problem is you're holding yourself out as an expert and you're creating potential liability issues, perception issues. He goes, no, but you don't understand, Lee, I really am an expert. And so he was completely unwilling to understand the point that I'm making, which is you can stress your experience, you can stress your special training, but I think that there's a perception that you're giving these clients that is going to get you deeper in the hole if something goes south.
And there's nothing wrong with if you just basically started doing short sales. You've got, you have some training, you're ready to go out there, talk with sellers about, you cover the broad strokes about how a short sale works. And then, certainly if you're in Las Vegas, anywhere in Nevada really, if you call Lee up, have him help you, have him oversee, have him close a short sale for you. There's nothing wrong with using an expert, a real expert like Lee, and then you have your bases covered. And Lee, I don't know, but in Nevada, I don't mean to make this a sales pitch for you, but in Nevada, can you get your negotiation fee covered outside of the commission, or how does that work?
There is no there's no particular rule that addresses that. I mean, we're aware of attorneys that are doing no fees up front, but success fees on the back, or they're requiring the agents to pay the fee, or they're requiring the clients to pay the fee. It's really all across the board. The biggest thing that always concerns me is making sure that whatever the fees are to whoever involved in the transaction, it is imperative that the lenders are aware of those fees. That's where
right.
agents get themselves into trouble.
Well, I know from personal experience, Lee, I know in other states that when an attorney does negotiate the short sale, that the realtor's commission is not affected. So in other words, the realtor's not paying for the negotiation fee. It's being paid by the servicer. And that, I believe, is still happening in most of the states. But let's move to this next question. I think this is actually going to be something else that we need to really kind of drill down on. What are the two to three biggest mistakes, aside from agents calling themselves experts when they aren't? What are the maybe 2 to 3 biggest mistakes you're seeing agents, and let's just expand it to say brokers making when it comes to short sales?
Well, I think first and foremost, the biggest concern I have is when agents cross the line and get into what is providing legal advice. For example, telling a client that, you know what, you don't want to go into bankruptcy. This is a better route. That's clearly giving legal advice. I am not a bankruptcy attorney. I would not tell somebody that. I would direct them to a bankruptcy attorney who can evaluate their situation for them, but it scares me how many times I have clients that come to me that say, the agent said I shouldn't even consider bankruptcy. Those kinds of crossing the line decisions and recommendations are going to get you in trouble. We had a woman just come in this week into my office who recently inherited, her sister passed away, left the house and a large brokerage account, and she's got a $300,000 inheritance. She went to 3 different agents who all advised her, just let that other house go into foreclosure, walk away from the house. And I was like, why? Yeah. Did they explain to me why they told you to walk away from the house? Oh, no, they just said, that, I can't file bankruptcy, but, this is the best avenue for me to pursue. And I called one of the agents, and I knew the agent, and asked them to explain to me, and, he hemmed and hawed a little bit. His description of, I explained to her that was an option, but she really needed to see an attorney. And that's a really dangerous scenario because, quite frankly, I cannot understand why they would tell her to walk away. There's going to be a deficiency judgment. She's got money coming in. Now, ultimately, we saw this as an opportunity of taking a shot at the short sale. When we got to know more about her circumstances, the fact that she was now on disability, that this inheritance was, and it wasn't an incredibly large sum, particularly with an elderly person who's looking at the possibility of going into assisted care, who's got a designated and diagnosed disability, that there's a way we think we can ultimately do a short sale, pay some money, or at least show her the alternative of turning it into a rental property and turning it over to a property manager. And so what's happening is we're finding agents who are just making determinations, giving legal advice. One of my favorites is the agents who hold themselves out as, we do more short sales than anybody. But what really is an effective short sale? Anybody can get a short sale approved. That isn't an issue. The key is, are they going to forgive the deficiency? That's the win. And I cannot tell you how many times clients have contacted us where they said, the agent said the short sale got approved, but they didn't explain to them what their rights were about a deficiency and understanding what they should do. And what they should do is they need to talk to an attorney during that process to understand what the deficiency can be. Now,
so let me jump in here, Lee. I'm sorry I hope I don't break your chain of thinking because this is great. Because we have a national audience, guys, deficiency judgments, the laws pertaining to them are different depending on what kind of state you're in or depending on where you are in the country. So, for example, if you're in California, your deficiency laws are dramatically different than, say, if you're in Ohio. And what Lee is saying, and I hope everyone's paying attention, Lee, actually we're jumping in a time machine going back like 3 or 4 years when, essentially the banks always try to put deficiency language in the letters. But now you can have it negotiated off. But one of the things that we've seen, Lee, and I know you've seen this too, on investment properties, non-primary residence, we're seeing that the banks are starting to slip it back in again. And if you don't, frankly, if you're not comfortable knowing how to negotiate that off, or you don't know what a letter that actually releases, where they actually say they're not going to send a deficiency judgment or do the deficiency judgment, if you don't know what that's supposed to look like, how that's supposed to read, then for gosh sakes, don't be portraying yourself as essentially being that expert, knowing essentially how to save that seller from the anguish of a deficiency. Guys, this is a huge issue because when they get that, bank lien, when they get the notice in the mail that they're being sued over deficiency judgment, they're going to go to their emails. They're going to pull up all this stuff when they're talking to some attorney. An attorney's going to research it. He's going to say, hey, it looks as though this realtor gave them bad information. The attorney's going to know that the realtor is going to have errors in admissions insurance, and they're probably, that's basically lock, stop, barrel. It's a perfect lawsuit for any attorney. So this is what Lee is trying to save you from. So guys, a lot of this is common sense. Lee is really drilling down now on the importance of not playing attorney. And so practical advice here, guys, brokers out there especially, frankly, whether your realtors are dealing with short sales or not, a great suggestion would be is when they're talking with the seller, give the name of 3 or 4 different attorneys that you feel comfortable referring business to, so that if that seller were to have maybe Lee, you can give me some more background on this, because I'm sure you deal with this all the time. How can an agent or a broker prepare themselves? But the old way of just passing out, giving these are a list of attorneys that we use that were just general attorneys, or some sort of disclosure where they're saying, we strongly suggest you get legal advice on this. Is there some sort of, pseudo agency form? Agency is the wrong word, but is there some way a broker can cover themselves on this? Help me out here.
That really rolls into what is one of my next pet peeves, and it is probably the biggest mistakes that I see agents make on a regular basis. I have several courses that have been certified for continuing ed credits from the real estate division, and one of them, we talk about an approach for what I call my licensee protection plan, or how do I cover my assets. And I ask agents all the time, what do you think that the D word stands for? What is the D word? And they always say, disclose. And I'm like, no, it's not disclose. Because right now I am wearing the hat of being the attorney for you, the agent, and you, the broker. It is not disclose. It is document. I find that agents, in many instances, they do make 2 or 3 referrals. They do tell the client to go seek legal advice. They do tell them that they're not an expert and that they need to find out what the tax ramifications are. And then, which is all great stuff, they've done everything right except do the D word, which is to document, to get it in the file that this is something that they advise the client. Sending them an email, confirming a telephone conversation, putting it in a telephone log. These are just incredibly important tools, because now what you do is you give me, as your defense attorney, the ammunition that when the client says, well, wait a second, he never told me that. Really? I've got an email here, or I've got a telephone log. And while those who are Matlock fans are out there saying, oh, no, you can't get that, that's all hearsay, that doesn't come into a trial, well, the answer is it does. It's what's called the business record exception to the hearsay rule, which means that if you record information in your file and you do it while it's fresh in your memory, and you do it not just in this particular instance, but as a regular part of your practice, it now has a certain credibility that and this isn't just in Nevada, this is all across the country. It falls under this business record exception, and so now, a year or 2 or more, when you may be in a deposition or you may be in a trial in front of a jury, there's credibility to explain why you specifically remember a particular phone call, because you've got an email to back it up, you've got a written phone log to back it up. Those are just such incredibly important tools. And again, it gets back to my theory, which is you've got to be proactive in your defense.
So when you're going in and talking with brokers and you're telling them the truth about all these potential litigation issues down the road, what you're telling them to do is have, what I'm hearing you say is that you're suggesting the brokers literally have additional disclosures signed, especially by potential short sale sellers, where the brokerage, the agent is specifically saying, make sure, talk, what forms specifically, or what types of disclosures are you suggesting? Let's be specific.
Well, I think it's very important that you disclose to them that they should talk to an attorney. They should talk to a CPA or an accountant, somebody who can talk to them about the tax ramifications. You've made the advice. Now, does it have to be a form that they sign off and acknowledge? It doesn't have to be. I mean, I'm not trying to overwhelm or complicate the process, but I think that an agent has to have a presentation where they cover these important pieces of information, and then they have something that they document in their file.
Well, but Lee, let's be honest here, though. If you can get the seller just to initial something or sign something, I envision like we have a form that we give to our students, right? And the form basically covers the things that they're supposed to be: talk with an attorney, talk with an accountant. I'm not I am a realtor. These are my specific legal responsibilities. If you have any questions about taxes, talk to a CPA, and those types of things. And then we actually have the seller sign it at the bottom, saying that, proving that the realtor did cover all their bases. So the event that they are pulled into litigation, they have at least something showing that the seller was correctly advised to seek the advice of professionals who are true experts on those particular topics.
I'm a huge fan of forms, and even in the short conversations we do. Okay, and as an attorney, I still use lots of forms. I have them acknowledge things such as, there is no guarantee. I cannot guarantee what the outcome will be. That I'm not an accountant. I want them to go get tax advice from their accountant to understand. But I will tell you, Tim, I just got a call the other day where an agent called me up and said, "Oh no, they don't get taxed on this because the lender issues a 1099-C." And I'm like, you don't understand what the 1099-C is. That's a tax reporting form about the cancellation of debt that creates the tax recognition event. It is the Mortgage Debt Relief Act. It is the act, the exemption that says when they receive that 1099 showing the cancellation of debt, it's not taxable. And
assuming they qualify for it, right? Assuming they qualify for the mortgage debt relief. Not
correct.
All of them will. There's specific, but most people will, 99% most likely. But still, again, it goes back to don't be playing accountant, don't be playing attorney. It's just stupid. And guys, to give the correct advice, to cover your butts, to give your sellers the best advice, all we're suggesting you do is just don't cross that line. All of you know what that line is. You can feel it when you find yourself talking about something that you're not truly an expert in. Stop. Don't make that mistake. You don't leave people, professionals, attorneys, accountants, they are constantly educating themselves on, exactly how the laws work. When I was a practicing agent, I sure as heck didn't want to keep up on all that. So we always referred, this type of question to professionals like Lee. It's just a good way of doing business. And, here's the other thing. Lee, from a sales perspective, agents sometimes don't want to do that because they're afraid that somehow in the minds of the sellers, they're going to set themselves up to not be experts. There's that, that stinking word again. Or they're going to set themselves up in the minds of the sellers not to somehow be professional. And the reality of it is, guys, as you heard Lee, who is an attorney, he tells his clients that he will avoid answering questions about accountancy, and he'll avoid answering questions about bankruptcy, and he'll refer his clients to experts. Doesn't it make sense that you should be doing the same thing? This, it really does fall into the category of common sense, I think, at some point.
It does, and I will tell you, my experience has generally been, look, even with a less sophisticated seller, they generally are able to get a sense when you're hemming and hawing, and I think my approach has always been, I think they respect when I tell them, hey, look, you're asking me a bankruptcy question. That's just not my area, but you know what? I'm going to get you the name of two people who are experienced practitioners in that area who I believe can answer those questions for you. And I never hear him say, oh, you know what, forget drives and that, God, he can't answer everything I need to know under the sun. In fact, the experience has been just the contrary, that they respect the fact that I'm pointing them in the right direction. I help them get the answers that they need when I can't provide that answer. And I tell my agents the exact same approach I think is the best way to practice. I think that we talked a little about the agents. I think there are a couple things that I just want to mention for the brokers out there as well. And it gets back to this issue of how did brokers get pulled into litigation? And I will tell you, in the last 20 years, I can't think of a single case that I've had where the agent got sued that they didn't go after the broker also. And even if the agent is an independent contractor, which virtually they are in every case I've ever had, the broker still comes in on different legal theories, and that is generally negligent supervision. And the issue of supervision is, have you provided guidance to your agents? And this comes up in a lot of different contexts. One of the biggest contexts that has really surprised me is the issue of fees. Brokers not knowing what fees are being charged in those states where you can charge a short sale fee in addition to the real estate commission, not regulating it, not setting any guidance for it. And I know agents get offended by that, but if I was a broker, I would want to have some idea to ensure that it's a supervised process, just like if I was a broker and someone's holding themselves out as I am a short sale expert, but they've only done 2 short sales, neither one of which was completed successfully. That's my broker's license on the line. I have a duty to supervise. And if I'm not aware of the representations that people are making as well as their expertise, and I'm not supervising them, I'm not asking them to mentor with a more experienced short sale agent, boy, I tell you, if I was a plaintiff's attorney, I am just salivating when I find those kinds of situations.
Again, there's another aspect to this, Lee, and I know you deal with this too, but, from an agent's perspective, from a broker's perspective, when you connect with a great attorney like Lee, there's a chance that he's going to refer you business. So it works both ways, guys. So think out of the box. And Lee, you know this. Brokers, agents, they have a predisposed kind of, notion that you connect your client with an attorney, the attorney is going to give them a whole bunch of information, and it's going to end up in you not getting a commission. Yes, that sometimes happens, but guess what, guys? In those particular cases where the attorney finds something that's wrong with the transaction and it doesn't end up closing, you don't end up getting paid, that may have just been essentially a transaction that should have closed where you would have gotten yourself into legal hot water. I mean, so you guys got to think from the 30,000, mile view here. And when you connect with an attorney like Lee, if you're suggesting that all your clients talk with whoever your local attorney is who has Lee's level of expertise when it actually, real expertise when it comes to short sales, refer them to him so that he can counsel them. He can give them answer questions that maybe they haven't even thought of asking. So, guys, these are the types of things that all of you should be doing, brokers and agents, if for no other reason just to cover your butt and avoid potential legal issues down the road. But truthfully, the real reason that you should be doing this is it is what is best for your seller. You are doing what is best for your seller. That is ultimately what all of your motivations should be. How can I do what is best for my client? And this is, frankly, following these very basic comments. There's nobody listening to this call right now that should have any even remote objections to a single thing that Lee or myself said, because it's common sense. And, frankly, maybe some of you need to be reminded that it's common sense. So, I mean, Lee, as far as other mistakes, what else comes to mind?
Well, I think that, and you just mentioned it, Tim, there is this reluctance to sometimes have the agents get an attorney involved. And I wanted to just address that briefly because I have had some agents, send me some very nasty emails about attorneys don't know what you're doing and you're just going to screw the deal up for me and get a lot. And I've also gotten, many, many nice emails. The ones I always want to talk to are the ones that have had bad experiences with attorneys. And I think it's really important for the agents to understand why it's important to use an attorney, but what you have to understand, which is I get referrals from agents, and a client comes into me. Please don't be mistaken about where my allegiance as the attorney has to be. My allegiance has to be, as Tim just said, what is in the seller's best interest. And normally when I have the initial conversation with a client, I want the agent to be there. And I say this in front of the agent. I say, look, Mrs. Seller, when we get done doing the evaluation, when we look at all your financial information, when we see what you have, when we find out ultimately that the short sale can only get approved, but the lender wants this money or they want another promissory note, etc., at the end of the day, you're going to get from me a decision that, you know what, sometimes the best decision is not to go forward on the deal. And obviously that is adverse to the real estate agent's interest. You're not going to get a commission. But it hits on the point that Tim just brought up. You are obligated to do what is in the client's best interest. And sometimes it may be not to do the deal. And it's just that simple. So you've got to understand that's the attorney's perspective going in. We don't go in there with the intention of screwing up a deal for an agent to get you out of your commission. What we do is we both have the same client that we have to look out for. But isn't that really what you want? Don't you want a situation that if it just isn't going to be the right situation for the client and they feel forced into that situation, that's where the exposure is created. And so I think it's really important that agents have a great perspective on understanding the role of the attorney and working with him or her and understanding that sometimes at the end of the day, the best decision, not just for the client but for you, is this is not a short sale that should go forward. And we see that all the time.
Well, I mean, so I'm an agent, right? I'm in Las Vegas, and I'm not an agent, but I am in Las Vegas. But if I'm going out there and I'm working, this is where my mind is going, right? Because I'm always thinking about agents, right? I'm always thinking about what it's like to actually be in the field every day, dealing with all these different, intricacies and problems, and now I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed listening to this, this interview. Don't feel overwhelmed, guys. This is how I want you to take this information. And Lee, if I say anything wrong, you're the expert here. You say, Tim, no, this is the way you should present this, okay? I give, obviously full permission. So if I'm a broker, first of all, and if I see agents using the word expert associated with anything that they do, I would think really long and hard about whether or not I'm comfortable with that. According to Lee, that is 100% litigation bait, so maybe that's something you guys should all be thinking about. And I know we're talking with brokers and agents all over the country right now who are listening to this in replay or listening to this live, and, you got to be using common sense here. If you're not truly an expert, then don't call yourself an expert. It isn't necessary. Don't do it. It's just litigation bait. Number two, if I'm out there and I'm meeting belly to belly with the seller and I'm trying to work through their problems, I can present to the seller that, listen, I have my own professional team that I work with. Here's Lee Dreisen and here's my CPA and here are the people that I suggest that you speak with about your specific questions about your tax ramifications or about the legal ramifications. Here is their contact information. Okay, and then I would make an NCR form or some form, and I'd give it to them with all the contact information, maybe even include some suggested questions that you might want to, suggest the sellers ask Lee when they're talking with him on the phone or whatever. And then if they use that information to call the attorney or the accountant, great. And if they don't, it's their decision. But at least at that point, guys, you have done your job of telling them to use an expert, to take, you're not being forced to give accountant or legal advice. Now, going forward, don't give accountant or legal advice. Don't cross that line. Don't make that mistake. If you start finding yourself having a conversation that's outside of your comfort zone or really outside what you legally should be talking about, you need to say to that seller, Mr. Seller, I gave you Lee's information earlier. It's on that form. If you don't have it, I can email it. I want you to call Lee and ask that question. That's how you should do this process, guys. Going forward, you need to present your accountants and these people that you know and trust. You need to bring them to the table for every listing appointment and present the information just like I did. From the seller's perspective, guys, that is going to put you on a different level than every other agent who's basically kind of doing a ham-fisted, presentation. We have, Lee, we have a presentation that we give to our agents to use when they're presenting to sellers. It's a digital presentation and also a paper-based, and there's like 2 or 3 slides that are just about this very topic. So agents, do your full disclosure, and then absolutely leverage fantastic, true experts in your communities like Lee. If you're in the Las Vegas Valley or anywhere in Nevada, you'd be crazy not to call this guy. I mean, guys, this is just common sense. And like I said earlier, and I'm sorry to sound so dramatic, but you've been warned. So if there's 24, 36 months from now or even 12 months from now, you're pulled into litigation, and that question comes up, you told the seller you're an expert and you weren't an expert, or they find out you were giving legal advice and you're not an attorney, that's not going to end well for you. So, Lee, is there any stone I'm not unturning here?
No, you just got on my soapbox, so that was...
Yeah, I mean, I know I did, actually, because when I heard from those brokers in Las Vegas about this presentation you were giving, I go, oh, my God, this guy, he's like my brother, He's finally someone who's out there telling the truth and being willing to make people uncomfortable, because I'd rather have you guys be uncomfortable now than a lot uncomfortable later when you're having to answer these uncomfortable questions. It's common sense, everything that we're saying. So, Lee, here's an interesting question, and maybe we can just deal with the realities of, the immediate Las Vegas market, but it's kind of an interesting way to, I think, wrap this interview up. How big is the short sale problem, and just generally speaking, how much longer do you think, knowing how to help owners do short sales, how long do you think that's going to be a relevant skill?
Las Vegas, the entire country obviously has taken a significant hit, but we're leading the country in deficiencies. And, we're not just talking about 10% drops in prices. We're seeing 55, 60% drops in prices. And traditionally, my understanding is that real property will appreciate 2 to 3% a year. So, I mean, do the math. We could be looking at decades that people are trying to carry these properties that are upside down. I don't see it going away anywhere in the near future, and that's consistent even with what the NAR legal scan is telling us.
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, 55% of all owners in Las Vegas are underwater. And then you guys are thinking, someone in Ohio is listening, oh, it's not that bad. Well, Ohio's not that bad, but it's something like 33%. But the real telltale statistic is this great report that Zillow did. I was so thankful when I saw Zillow actually, they went and studied these different reports that were out there. For a long time it's been said that 11 million owners are underwater. Well, Zillow went and started doing their own homework on this, updated the information sources, and now they're saying 19 million owners are underwater. 19 million. And guys, Lee just said something very, very interesting. Normal home, and some people call it appreciation, but really all of it is inflation. If normal home inflation were to kick back in and properties appreciated 2 to 3% per year, do the math. How many years is it going to take for somebody who's 55% underwater to have normal inflation make it so they're at least even with their mortgage? 10 years, here's a cold hard fact. In some parts of the country, it'll never happen. Prices will never come back. So knowing how to do short sales, connecting with, true experts like Lee, you guys have to be doing this if you want to be relevant in the real estate industry for most likely the rest of your careers. And Lee, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time out today. I know you're extremely in demand in the Valley for agents and brokers. Is there anything else you'd like to say to wrap the call up?
No, I think, again, the not to keep harping on this, but it's a point that you made, and it is just so important. Listen to your common sense, because, when I teach agents, I always ask them, because I pride myself in the fact that I am trying to make realistic decisions, not just things that, an attorney will tell you, blah, 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 and then it goes in one ear and out the other because it has no practical application. But I think what Tim's saying is so important. Got to use your common sense. Most agents know when they're crossing that line, or they see it coming, that there's that potential that they're not comfortable saying something, but I know it's difficult, I know it's competitive out there, but I can assure you that no commission is better than a commission and a lawsuit any day of the week.
And if you think your errors and omissions insurance is going to cover you, we've just sort of shed some light on the fact that probably going forward is going to be challenged. So, guys, think out of the box here. Please, please, please listen to this interview again and again and again. Brokers out there, I know we have the ears of a lot of the largest brokers in the country. I know some people from the National Association of Realtors listen to these interviews. Guys, feel free to share this with everyone you know. There is no hidden agenda here. We're just passing along information that's designed to help people. So agents, brokers, please pay attention. Be always mindful of what is best for your seller. Be always mindful of what, frankly, is best for your long-term career. So, Lee, listen, I want to sincerely thank you for joining us today and being today's Harris Real Estate University superstar. Let's give everyone one last opportunity to write down your contact information. What's your phone number again?
It's area code 702-798-4955.
So, Lee, on behalf of Julie, myself, and all the coaches and, frankly, the students here at Harris Real Estate University, I want to thank you for being today's Harris Real Estate University superstar.
I appreciate it, Tim. Thank you.